In 1986, Nintendo released a game that didn't try to guide you. No flashing objectives. No one telling you where to go. You press start, and you're alone. A sword in your hand, an open world in front of you, and no explanation. At a time when most games were about high scores and quick reflexes, this one was about curiosity, about getting lost, about discovery. And here's the part most people don't realize. This design was a risk. Because if players didn't understand it, the game would fail. But it didn't. And that quiet design decision would influence decades of game development. This is the story of how The Legend of Zelda changed adventure games forever. In 1983, the video game industry collapsed. In the United States, shelves were flooded with low-quality cartridges. Retailers stopped trusting publishers. Consumers stopped trusting games. What had once been a booming industry suddenly felt disposable. Billions were lost. And for many analysts at the time, video games were just a passing fad. But across the Pacific, something very different was happening. The Famicom. And unlike the fragmented Western market, this console was built with tighter quality standards, stronger hardware identity, a unified ecosystem. At that time, most successful games followed one formula: short sessions, clear objectives, score-based progression. The goal wasn't immersion, it was repetition. This shift wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. What if a game didn't end after 3 minutes? What if it asked you to remember, to think, to explore? What if a console game could feel like an adventure? And in that question, the foundation for something revolutionary was born. Before he designed worlds, he explored one. In the outskirts of Kyoto, a young boy wandered through forests, fields, and hidden paths. He would leave home without a map, without instructions, guided only by curiosity. One day, he discovered a cave. He hesitated at the entrance, then stepped inside. That feeling, fear mixed with wonder, never left him. Years later, when he began designing games, he wasn't thinking about difficulty curves. He was thinking about that cave, about discovery without explanation, about the thrill of not knowing what waits beyond the next path. For him, a game wasn't just a system, it was a place. And a place should invite exploration, not obedience. By the mid-1980s, he was no longer unknown. His work on Super Mario Bros. Had already reshaped platform design. Precise controls, clear goals, forward momentum. What if a player could go anywhere? What if the world didn't push you forward, but waited for you? What if adventure wasn't about reaching the end, but about the journey itself? Miyamoto didn't want to design a challenge. He wanted to recreate a memory, and that memory would become The Legend of Zelda. In an era where most games trained you immediately, Zelda trusted you. There was no tutorial screen, no pop-up explaining controls. The first cave gives you a sword and a short sentence: "It's dangerous to go alone." And that was enough. Progress wasn't measured by score. It was measured by tools. A raft opens water paths. A ladder crosses rivers. Bombs reveal hidden doors. The world doesn't scale with you. But perhaps the most radical idea was invisible. Secrets. Hidden walls. Burnable trees. Unmarked dungeons. There was no internet. So players talked. At school. At playgrounds. In magazines. Did you know there's a dungeon under that tree? Zelda wasn't just played. It was discussed. You unlock it. Each item changes how you see the map. The world was always open. You just didn't know how to read it yet. By early 1986, Japan's home console market was stable. Arcades still dominated public spaces. But inside homes, the Famicom had quietly become a ritual. After school, on weekends, in small living rooms across the country, the first reaction wasn't explosive hype. It was curiosity. Players shared notes. They drew maps by hand. They tested bomb placements against random walls. Some felt lost, but many felt something rarer. Ownership. This wasn't a game you cleared. It was a world you learned. Arcades were public, competitive, performative. Zelda was private, reflective, slow. In arcades, failure was immediate. In Zelda, confusion became part of the journey. And in Japanese homes, that subtle shift began redefining what a console game could be. Not a test of reflex, but a space for exploration. By 1987, Nintendo was ready to try again in America. The industry had collapsed just a few years earlier. Retailers were cautious. Consumers were skeptical. But this time, Nintendo controlled everything. Hardware, distribution, quality. And at the center of that strategy was one game, The Legend of Zelda. Then there was the cartridge. Gold. Not gray like the others. It looked valuable. Premium. Different. American critics noticed. Zelda wasn't just technically impressive. It felt expansive. It felt ambitious. Magazines praised its scale, its secrets, its sense of adventure. One of the most practical revolutions was invisible. Saving. Arcade games were built around repetition. Home games often relied on passwords. But in Japan, the original release of The Legend of Zelda used the Famicom disk system, allowing players to save progress directly. When it arrived in the West, the NES cartridge included a battery-backed save system. This changed everything. Progress no longer depended on memory alone. It became persistent. Zelda didn't invent exploration. Perhaps the most profound shift was philosophical. Arcade design asked, "How long can you survive?" Zelda asked, "How far can you go?" The focus moved from score to progression, from repetition to discovery, from performance to experience. And once that shift happened, there was no going back. But it standardized it. A cohesive world, item-based progression, environmental puzzles. This structure became a template, not just for sequels, but for the industry. The idea that a console game could simulate a journey became viable and profitable. Today, open worlds are everywhere. But in 1986, the idea that a player could choose direction was radical. Zelda didn't just create a map. It created a mindset. Exploration not as a feature, but as the core experience. And once players tasted that freedom, the industry could never fully return to simple score chasing. Modern exploration design was born in silence, in a small cartridge, in a quiet decision. If you want to explore more stories that shaped Nintendo and the history of games, subscribe, and we'll continue the journey.